It's time for WFO Radio NHRA Nitro. Here's your host, Joe Costello.
Hey everybody, WFO, Joe Costello here with you. NHRA podcast rolling along as we are checking in with some of the personalities of NHRA drag racing, and we're going crew chief on this one. Rob Flynn going to be our guest on the show, and this one came together pretty well. Rob and I have interacted many times out there at the NHRA, but he has not been on the show. He has got one of the most interesting and long-running crew chiefing resumes back to the 70s, and we're going to have him on the show, and I'm going to ask him to just give his arc, right? Like started when, did what with who, when, and kind of run through the whole deal. Also try to figure out how these Nitro engines run. So stick around for that, but we want to delve in a little deeper since we don't have race winners with the people who help these drivers win races, and I'm talking about the crew chief. So Rob Flynn going to be on the show, and it's his idea, honestly, in that Rob and I were texting, and he's like, you should get some crew chiefs on, and he wasn't talking about him, and he's got to be first. That's the way I'm doing it. So if you like the whole crew chief mentality, I think in many ways they're the most interesting people out there, certainly carry a lot of the burden of winning and losing. You're going to love this show. Earlier in the week, we had Sean Langdon. We had Alan Reinhardt. Our show last Friday Cocktails, turned out to be a hit. So who knows? Maybe we'll do that again. Stick around. Click subscribe. WFO Radio Podcast. A lot of fun coming up, and maybe it won't be fun, but it would be fun to find out if it's fun or not. You get it? Good. Sponsors, the people who make it all possible. Total Seal Piston Rings. We have got a scheduled recording for new Hidden Horsepower podcast. You should be listening and check them out. Don Ott is the latest one. A lot of legends of the engine building trade on there. But really, it's also that you know that when you build your engines, you need to use Total Seal Piston Rings. And I've been connecting with a lot of my people, and I have been hearing really positive information. As in, phones are still ringing, people still building engines, getting ready for when they can go back racing again. I love to hear that. 800-874-2753, TotalSeal.com. Samtech.edu, 713-683-3817. That's the School of the Automotive Machinist and Technology. And start your education at full speed, right? You got to think about your life, not just 1 month ahead, but 10 years ahead. What are you going to do with your career? Samtech.edu can get you started off right. Frank Hawley's Drag Racing School, 866-480-7223. Whether you want to get your license, whether you want to go on the Dragster Adventure, they go around the country. 866-480-7223. The Dragster Adventure. MagicDryUS.com, the official organic absorbent of the NHRA, and Rodax. CoffeeandGrills.com. Marvin Rodak. I got to get Marvin on. Maybe I'll have Marvin on Friday Cocktails. That will be good. We'll discuss the issues of the day. 817-924-6821. I got to do better than dumping vodka in my coffee, though. I caught a lot of heat on that one. Deservedly so. 817-924-6821. That's Rodax, CoffeeandGrills.com. And everybody's saying it, right? Got to keep the small businesses alive. We got a bunch of small businesses right there. Racing businesses. Keep them alive. 817-924-6821, or all of our sponsors, plus Drag Racing Edge and EV3 Drag Racing. We appreciate those guys. WFO. All right. The crew chiefs, they bear the burden. They have the responsibility. How do they get to where they are, though? We've got a great one to ask. Joining us now on NHRA Podcast, we're going to dive in with a Hall of Fame crew chief who has worked for many great teams, and someone that I have come to really respect out there on the starting line because he always gives me an interview, and that's how I judge folks. Joining us now from Kalitta Motorsports, co-crew chief for Doug Kalitta, Mr. Rob Flynn. Rob, welcome to WFO Radio. How are you?
Hey, Joe. How are you doing?
All right.
I'm doing good. Just hanging out here in Avon, Indiana.
I'm great as well, hanging out in Pembroke Pines, Florida. Not a whole lot going on at the moment, but I think that's what gives us the opportunity to have conversations like this. So before we talk about, I want to delve into your career, and I want to learn some things about nitro engines. But, what is your status right now? You guys came out of the box really strong. You finished the year really strong, and then full stoppage. So how are you handling all that?
Yeah, we ended the year on a strong note, like you said, and we really didn't make a whole lot of changes coming into the new year. I mean, the normal stuff, clutch packs and such like that. And then every little part of the car, every year you kind of pick away at everything to try and make it a little bit better. And I think we've achieved that because, the proof is in the performance so far this year. And, Doug's driving at an elite level as usual. And, going into Gainesville, we were all prepared. We'd front half our car, and our spare car was, front half during the wintertime, and everything was fresh. And, we were going to start Gainesville with a fresh car. And then on Monday, we were planning to test a few things and run our spare car and see if that was the car we wanted to use moving forward. And so all that stuff's on hold. And basically we just had more time to get prepared for whenever we're going to start racing again.
There will not be an excuse of being unprepared after this break. I think everybody is going through their programs with a fine-tooth comb, top to bottom, whether it be organizing their shops, their trailers, their tools, their parts, whether it be, thinking about how to handle whatever schedule is presented to us. And that's what we don't know, right? The X factor, like when it starts and when certain races will be, et cetera. And obviously we're at the mercy of the facts on the ground whenever that comes.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, if you had looked at the schedule prior to this, there was only a certain amount of open weekends anyway. So now it's going to be a real compressed schedule, and I'm sure there'll be more back-to-backs or 4 in a rows or all the above. So, it's even more important to be prepared because when you got to keep racing like that, and, obviously Nitro cars are run on a lot of parts and personnel, and you can't burn the personnel out totally trying to get all the stuff ready. So, the more prepared we are now, it should pay dividends in the future for all of the teams.
Well, I think it's going to be a year that we all remember for the rest of our lives as something that happened to us collectively, worldwide. But in the end, I'm really hoping there's going to be a Top Fuel world champion that is connected to this year, and it'll be a little bit different than all the rest, but a champion nonetheless, and so everyone's got to be ready and prepared. Let's talk a little bit about how you got started in this, though. You have worked with many colorful personalities, many of the great crew chiefs. You started out a long time ago. You were kind of a, I would say, under the radar personality in that you're not getting the headlines, you're calm, you're collected, you're Canadian, part of the Canadian Drag Racing Hall of Fame. How did you get started with drag racing, period, Rob?
I was, growing up in Western Canada, I was, at first I was into motorcycles when I was, my young teens. And then as I got a little bit older, I met a friend I had a newspaper route, and I met a friend there, and he said, well, let's go to the drag races one day. And so, I'd been wanting to go. I'd been trying to talk my dad into taking me, and he was really not interested at all. And so this friend that worked at a dealership, he said, yeah, let's go. And so ironically, the first time we walked in the gate, the fuel cars were running, and that's at the time they were push starting them. This is in 1975 in Edmonton. And so the first cars that I ever saw at a drag strip were fuel cars, and I think the hook was set from that point on.
Wow. Do you remember who was on the track? Or, you're creating a vivid memory for me. I can imagine what that must have been like to get that kind of experience.
Oh, absolutely. It was Jerry Ruth and Maynard Garrity that were on the track. The same race had, Gary Beck was there, and I'm not even sure of all the people that were there at that time, but I do know that Gordy Bonin had the bubble up Monza car, and he was racing against Don Prudhomme in the Army Monza, and those are vivid memories. Some of the stuff that I'd never seen before, obviously, and just seen in magazines, and so that was a pretty exciting time to go to the racetrack at that time.
Oh, I can imagine. And at that time, I'm a little younger than you are, but believe me, I was involved at that point. My dad had me interested in drag racing from the earliest of days, and I had trading cards and I had different toys and such. But to be out there and see them in real life as a high schooler, right? Like, you're a high school kid, 1975, Nitro cars or match racing around the country. That had to be like what people consider the golden era right now.
Oh yeah, no, I was 15 at the time, didn't even have a driver's license yet, and I was bitten by cars by then. I was doing the newspaper route, and then I later went and worked in a restaurant, getting money so I could buy my own, my first car and stuff like that. I was able to find some friends that their daughter actually worked in the concessions and rode with them to another couple races that year, and so from that point on, I had to get involved with this. And so the following year, when I did have my own license and a car, I could go to the track on my own. And, I started meeting people and putting yourself out there. And lo and behold, here we are today, still racing.
Wow. Well, not just pro racing, but pro racing for a lifetime. And with staying power, right? Like, you've been able to work with some of the best. Tell me about your first job, though, like going from being an interested kid to someone paid you to do something, and now you're working in this business.
Well, that would have probably been, I graduated in 1979 from high school, and my first job there was a guy named Brent Bramley. He was actually the 1976 Pro Comp World Champion. That's when they decided to rate the championship off of a single race, which was the World Finals in Ontario. And in 79, I went to work with him, and I was his only crew guy. And so we did pretty much everything. And he ran, in the time I helped him, which was, basically 2 or 3 years, he ran everything from a Donovan to a small block Chevy in his alcohol dragster. So got to learn a lot about all different things. He even dabbled with an Oldsmobile project that he was trying to work with Warren Johnson. And so that was my first time of really not necessarily getting paid, but it covered expenses. And I got to race full time and go to as many races as possible. He had a friend that was involved with Holly Carburetors, was actually the guy at the racetrack, a guy named Chuck College. And he was based out of Pontiac, Michigan. And so when we were back east, we keep the car at his house and go from there to, the races in that area. So that was a lot of learning curve right there on, and really got my feet wet to want to do this full time.
And you stuck with it, so you definitely loved it. But I can't help but think of the millions of road stories that you must have. And as you know, in this business, like, road stories are almost a currency. When it's raining outside or you can't go down the racetrack, all of a sudden the stories come out. Like, you must have seen some stuff. Like, I can't help but think, for the younger people out there listening, like, no GPS, man. Over the road, map. Right, like finding your way from racetrack to racetrack, from place to place, all kinds of crazy situations going on that had to be very fun for you.
Oh, the stories are endless. Yes, no GPS, no cell phones. You go to truck stops, and if you need to get a hold of or buy parts, you just call whoever, and you had your little card that would charge it back. And driving down the road late nights, chaparral trailers with a sleeper on the back, one guy sleeping and another one driving. And, you'd always have to drink Mountain Dew or John on candy and beef jerky, you name it. Crazy things when you travel with guys. One thing I can remember, this is really crazy, but we're traveling with Mike and Pat Austin, and I was with a guy named Kirk Lawrence, and this is 1985, and we were racing the alcohol dragster, and they were racing their alcohol funny car. And we got into a thing on the road where these guys went and bought fireworks, and they're shooting them back and forth at each other, which is totally crazy when you consider the amount of gas we were carrying driving down the road with us. So, those are memorable. people, like you said, with maps and that, where you think you know which direction you're going and go the total wrong direction and then have to backtrack to get on the right track to get to the next race. So those were some crazy times, that's for sure.
Wow. Any like booked in stuff or mostly NHRA tour stuff?
Well, at that time that was NHRA, but as we moved along, I worked for, Whit Bazemore in 1994, and that we did a lot of little shows. Basically, that was our cash flow to keep our little team going. Was we'd go and run 8-mile racing in Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, or we'd go up to Great Lakes Dragway and run against John and in those races there, match races up there. We'd actually go up to Canada, wherever they would book us in. And like I said, it was cash flow to keep our team going. We were sponsored by, Fast Orange, which is a Loctite corporation, but, to keep the team going, we had to bring cash in all the time too.
Bazemore just inducted Lee Beard into Big Daddy's International Drag Racing Hall of Fame the other night, and I was there for that. And Bazemore gave this great story of the early days, like yard sale, things everywhere, parts and pieces, and that Beard drove by and made a couple of comments, and eventually he got the program going together. What was that like, those early times? Bazemore, one of the big personalities, and that was your first full-time crew chiefing job, from what I understand.
Yeah, that was definitely my first full-time crew chiefing job. And really how that came about was I'd worked on the McDonald's Dragster in 93, and the following year, I just was, I wanted to get into the crew chief situation, and there was a better offer, and so I left, and then that really didn't turn out so well. And at the same token, Whit was trying to get someone to run his program, and he called me up and goes, I really want you to run this. And I'm like, okay, as long as we can have it in Indianapolis, because I don't really want to move. And he's like, well, and he was in Atlanta, and he was working out of Hedman Headers, Bob Banneker Senior's shop and that. And so he goes, okay, I'll hire you. And so that's how it all started. He had a small amount of money from Loctite, and he had a lot of parts, he said, in Georgia. So we drove down there and got it. And when we came back to India, I'd found a little shop and started going through his stuff. And like you were saying, not a lot of it was usable. And so we basically started from scratch back then. And that was certainly some interesting times.
Wow. Can you just give me a list from that point? Because, you worked all through the 80s with various different teams, maybe too many to list. But just I'd love to hear you pick up, like you mentioned, the McDonald's car, so that's Joe Gibbs Racing. So you worked for the coach. Well, give me just a list.
Actually, that would have been Larry Miner, and Lee Beard was the crew chief, and then I was the, I guess what they call car chief now, or chief mechanic is what I did there. But I did the cylinder heads and one side of the engine. So, but prior to that, I'd worked, with the Gwynns in 91 and 92 when they had the Coors Light sponsorship.
So you worked with Daryl, all right. So
with Ken Venny and
Daryl, Ken Venny. Let's just pick it up right there, because Daryl's a friend of the show, and being from South Florida, like one of my drag racing heroes. What was it like working with DG during that time? Which there was pre-crash, post-crash, but Daryl always had a very strong team.
Yeah, and that was post-crash, and so when they hired me, they hired me to do a lot of the duties that Daryl did day to day. I mean, Daryl wasn't just the driver; he ordered the parts. He worked on the car all the time. I mean, it was a constant. Daryl and Jerry. And they had a couple of full-time crew guys, Nick Flock and Gary Clark, unfortunately no longer with us. And they brought me in and made me part of the family there. I'd had some time helping Ken Benny back in the 80s, like you said, a lot of people in the 80s that I worked with. And, it was a good learning curve. I mean, we had a car that ran pretty good. Things were changing as they do in racing. We just, everything was progressing, and Ken Benny was, great to learn from. He, very innovative. None of the stuff that we ran, other than most of the car stuff, was similar to anyone else. It was all, some sort of a brainchild of Ken's or something he wanted to do. So it was really interesting times.
I can imagine. And I texted Daryl about, hey, you got any Rob stories? And he just said that you're a great guy. And he told me about Gary and Nick and, what a tough situation that must have been for you and you guys in general, but able to stay with the drag racing family and get through it.
Yeah, that was tough times because there was Gary and Nick and myself were the full-time guys going down the road. I mean, we had flying guys, Chris Cunningham and Joe Schaefer and then Tony Mills was coming to the track with Daryl to take care of him. But you just did what you had to do. It's kind of like the times we're in now. I mean, when we start racing again, you're going to do what you got to do, and it was a sad time, but we just buckled down and got some more guys to come and help. And, some of those guys that came along in those days are, friends that I've had since then. Mike Gary came, he was working for Dave Uhar at the time, and he came on board and started helping us. And just there's a list of people a mile long that went out of their way to help when things went bad down there.
So Gwynn to Larry Minor, and then just run through the list as best as you can.
Well, 94 and 95 with Babesmore, we had Fast Orange sponsorship. And then at the end of 95, we picked up some help from Mobile One. And with that, we'd been working on trying to put together something with RJR. And in 96, we actually were able to get the Smokin' Joe's sponsorship. So that carried on through the Team Winston in 97, the No Bull Team Winston in 98. And then they were starting to deal with some issues with sponsorship and motorsports and that, and they started to back away. They kept backing Alan Johnson and Angel, but they were starting to move away from their involvement in drag racing at that time. So, I was fortunate to be teammates with Alan Johnson for 96 and 98. And actually in 99, Alan put together a deal with Jerry Tulliver for Chris Cunningham and our team to, once we were, the Bazemore thing kind of went away, to put together the WWF thing. So, that was pretty good team. We had Chris Cunningham, Kurt Elliott, and myself, and a whole list of characters, Lou Arrington, that put together the WWF program. And we did that for a year, and Alan said, I want to do that. When I get a funny car, I want you guys to come run that. And so, in 2000, Alan decided he wanted to have a funny car. And so, we'd already agreed to do that. So we moved over to Alan's funny car, which was the Emula funny car that Bruce Sarver drove. So we put that whole program together too from scratch, which entailed building cars and the truck and trailer and everything. So we, I ended up working out of Santa Maria, putting all that stuff together at that time and putting a crew together that, wasn't part of our group at that time. So, and that was still involved Chris Cunningham, who was still working a full-time job and coming to the races on the weekends. So those were some real good times there.
Wow. I just love hearing the names, Rob. I just love hearing the names because, first of all, these are the guys that are, like, you guys are all still out there, like maybe not all of you, but many of you are still out there and at a tremendously high level, like Chris, obviously, world champion over there on the funny car side with Jimmy and Robert, and knowing he was with Daryl early on, like just seeing the threads, go out through the sport and come back together and then go back out. Like, to me, that is just so interesting. So keep going. 2000.
Well, I could even go backwards a little bit. I'll say something about 96. Our team in 96 was Smoking Dills. We had Dickie Venables, Kurt Elliott, Chris Cunningham, and his father, Mike, a guy named Larry Lush, and myself, and Lou Arrington, all were involved with that team. And so there you have a bunch of people that, that spend a lot of time racing. And, obviously Dickie has been very successful as a championship crew chief. And like you said, Chris Cunningham, now Kurt Elliott is is the co-crew chief with Connie on Sean Langdon's car this year and last year. And myself with Doug Kalitta in that. So, those were some good times, and obviously a lot of us, this is our passion, and we've stayed with it. So, and we've worked together at other places too. It's just a kind of a family circle, as we say.
That 1990s, though, I think is really where the sport, we talked about the 70s maybe being the golden era, but the 90s is where I think it all came together as like a mainstream, not that people make money with the sport, but definitely the business of motorsport. And you're talking about these massive sponsorships. There was money. The sport was, it seemed, flush with money at the time, where a lot of the tracks that we see now maybe were conceived. I know that Chicagoland was built in the late 90s, that kind of stuff. So it had to be kind of cool to see that transition go down.
Yeah, maybe you go back to Chicago. 98 was the first year. We won the inaugural race with Bazemore and the Team Winston. We actually raced Del Worsham in the final. So, that's memorable. And you had all the, you had the beer sponsors and those guys racing against each other. You had, Skoll was involved with at the time, and Winston, and a lot of the auto parts stores. There was a lot going on at that time. It was things were really rolling along.
Interesting.
Into the 2000s for sure.
Well, exactly. And so let's move into the 2000s. Like we mentioned, the cigarette sponsorships start to come out, and that's when our great relationship with Coca-Cola came around. So talk about what you did now beyond the Alan Johnson funny car, because ultimately we get to David Powers, yeah. Right?
Correct. Well, the Alan Johnson funny car thing was. It was in the transition to the 90%, and we really didn't do that well. And after a while, you're working for Alan Johnson. Let's face it, he's one of the main guys out there, and we ended up parting ways. And so at the time, Del Worsham had the CSK sponsorship, and he says, "Well, I want you to come to Denver with me." And so I went to Denver, and Del had run okay there in the past, and I had some ideas and stuff like that. And, we'd see if this would work out. And fortunately, it did work out. And so I was with Del from Denver of 2000 through Englishtown of 2002. And we had quite a bit of success with certainly with the red car. We won, quite a few races. I think we finished second or third in 2001. In 2002, we started getting into where tires were changing and our setups were changing. And as we were learning, we didn't always hit the right setup. And, so I was still, wanting to keep progressing my career, and you have the opportunities and keep trying different things. And so in part of 2002, I went to Prud'homme's. We had the Blue Skull funny car with Tommy Johnson driving, and they had been struggling the way their team was set up, and they wanted to bring someone else in. And if you want to talk about another all-star group, there was, Larry Meyer was there, and Jason McCullough was there. John Collins was there. Another guy that's certainly been involved with a lot of the alcohol cars and that. Adam Rhodes was there. So that was a very strong crew at that time too. But unfortunately, that only lasted till the end of the year, and then Prudhomme decided he wanted to go a different direction. So here we are again looking for another gig. So.
Wow. It's like it reminds me of the radio broadcast industry, something I'm a little more familiar with. It's just like you get something gets going, and maybe through no fault of your own, just the circumstances change, and you're looking for a gig.
Yeah, and in 2003, Cruz hired Dave Fletcher, and then Dave Fletcher had been with Worsham on the blue car, and he goes, well, why don't you come work with me on this car? And we're like, okay. So, there again, we started, from scratch, because there was really no leftover employees, and we put together with the Advance Auto, and we ran Cruz's car. And part of 2003, and then partway through, Cruz decided to let Dave Fletcher go, and we kind of had, quite a few different crew guys all the time. So, good things come to an end, and that ended too. So once again, we're out and looking around, and I'm thinking, well, I need to diversify myself, because everyone thinks all I can do is this funny car stuff. So I really wanted to get involved with Top Fuel, and that's when I went to Pomona looking around to see if there's any jobs, and Bob Vandergrift, who I was friends with for many years, he says, what do you think we could do if cost to put all my stuff together and go race 10 races? And I'm going, I don't know. And he goes, I got some friends that'll, sponsor us, and do you have any? And I go, oh, I can check into that. And so anyway, to make a long story short, we took all of his sort of kind of outdated equipment, but not outdated equipment, and put together a program in 2004 and ran 10 races. 2 of the races we had Terry Kapp from Edmonton driving the car. Basically, Ron Hodgson leased the car to run in Edmonton and Seattle. And at that era was when we all switched to 85%. And the setup that we had was certainly not conducive to changing to 85% at that time. And we actually ended up in the final round at Reading, but we destroyed all of our inventory getting there, and that was the end of that program. But it was the seeds of the UPS program that Bob put together. I believe probably it was in 2006 or something like that.
Wow, that's interesting to think about. In terms of the rules changes, like there have been a couple of times where we think rules change. All right, everybody adjusts, but the rules change can cause a shakeup if you don't figure it out quick enough. And we've seen that happen a couple of times. Like you get into a groove, and then the rules change happens, and then now we're blowing up stuff, and that's not a good thing.
No, and that we had this this older equipment, and on 90% it was very competitive, but on 85 now, that what was going to take to do that, I mean, we spent a little bit of money and where we thought we could gain some of the performance back, but in the end it just turned into, like I said, just destroying all the inventory and basically putting the team out of business until 2006.
Yikes. Thanks. Okay, now while all this is going on, like I'm hearing a lot, what about the family life of Rob Flynn? Like, and I don't know the answer to this. You married, kids, any of that stuff? They're obviously very tolerant and patient, if this is the career trajectory.
Yeah. Obviously, my wife is very tolerant. Yeah, I have a daughter that's 23 and a son that's 21. My daughter was actually born the week of our first win at Dallas with the Smokin' Joe's car with Dale Paldy driving. after Whit Bazemore had been injured on a motorcycle for the second time in '96. So, that was a big week in my life. And like I said, we lived in Avon, Indiana since 1992 and the end of '92. And, that's where the family is. And so that's where we're at today. My son's in college at IUPUI, and my daughter took the Paul Mitchell course and is a hairstylist in Brownsburg.
Wow, there you go. Plug. Someone should, need a haircut. Go see him. Of course, after the social distancing, of course.
Absolutely.
Was there ever a thought of getting out of drag racing, Rob? Did you ever sit at the dinner table and say, man, maybe I should do something else?
Oh yeah, that happened many times. I mean, but as long as you can keep, putting food on the table, and it's your passion, I've just stayed with it from day one, really. And that's really what it amounted to, is just, like you said, no one's really getting rich racing, but it's our passion, and we love doing it. And you just make things happen, make it work. Sometimes I call it creative financing. That's how we did with Bazemore. It was creatively financed. Fortunately with Kalittas, we have a strong backer there. So, that's not totally necessary anymore.
Wow. And I want to get to that also. It just, I'm big, the listeners know this, I'm big into the career arc, right? Like, how did you get here? And also, this is great research for everything else I intend to do with the NHRA. But now we're getting into an era where I'm conscious of what went down, because I was working at XM Satellite Radio in 2007 when Hot Rod Fuller had his near championship run and came within one round of the championship, and you were on that team. And I want to hear a little bit about that season, because and no offense to Tony Schumacher and the Army car in that team, but I felt like Rod would have been a great underdog story and had a great year and really had put it together, and just came up a whisker short in 2007. So let's focus in on that experience with David Power Motorsports and Hot Rod Fuller.
Well, that actually started in 2005 for myself. Lee Beard, who I'd worked with the Larry Minor team in what year was that now? 1993. He was over there, and he just called me one day and he goes, I want you to come and help us. And next race was Memphis. And so I went to Memphis, and it was, if anyone remembers going there, it was very hot and humid, like unbearably. And we ran at night, and lo and behold, we ended up winning the race, which was Rod Fuller's first win. And, that kind of set that in motion, that, with that program. And in '06, we won a couple of races. So we were, cruising right along. '07, Whit Bazemore came in, and he brought the Matco sponsorship. And we had a couple of races where we were funded with Rod's car with Valvoline, but really after that, there wasn't a whole lot of funding other than David Powers, and David incurred a lot of expense just starting this second team. And so we were out there, and we were, working on the Caterpillar sponsorship at that time. And I don't know if you remember, we ran the car white quite a few times.
Yes.
We call it Great White. But really, the sponsorship was just very, very minimal at that time, other than the Valvoline funded races. But it was the seeds of the CAT program, and the CAT program was basically to get technicians. And what they would do is they'd bring a whole bunch of people to the races. People had never been before, which was pretty interesting, because you got various scopes of people that come to the race and never been to a drag race. And, some love it and some hate it. And it was interesting to interact with all those people. And we really paid a lot of attention to the people in hospitality, because that was going to be our funding to keep that program going. And it was kind of a makeshift, a bunch of guys that got together on that car because, like I said, the Matco car was fully funded, and Lee had his group there, and you're going to run that car. And so, we really couldn't hurt a lot of parts, but the car ran really well. I think we qualified number one quite a few times. I believe we were in 6 final rounds, won 4 races. Numerous different people coming through the team because we only had enough full-time guys to keep it going a certain amount of time. Gary Pritchett, who's, with Torrance now, he was, that was his first, time into a fuel car, and obviously he's been very successful. Shafty,
Wow.
David Carcanis, he worked there, and he was a very well thought of clutch guy at the time. Mike Duger was the co-crew chief on the car, and we worked real well together, and we ended up like you said, within a whisker of winning the championship, and just some things just didn't go right, and it came down to the last run of the year. It was Bob Vandergriff racing Tony Schumacher in the final round at Pomona.
Wow. Well, the list of names you just put out there, like that's what it is. It's the people, and you think about other championship caliber teams, just to get in that position, you guys did great. Sometimes the breaks go your way, sometimes they don't. And Tony, obviously, has been able to have the breaks go his way quite a few times. But the list of names, like, I don't know if everybody out there, as the listeners know, like Shafty is, he did a lot of great stuff with the Army team for a while, and he's back out there now, incidentally. But it's just to hear the list. You mentioned Gary Pritchett, like, look what he has gone on to become. The diamonds in the rough, right? Like, they go on to be big things.
Oh yeah, there was a list a mile long. I mean, Dick Jackson was on that team too, and he's been a long time, with John Force Racing, and all those guys are important. I mean, and I felt like we had a small team with very little funding that year, and a lot of people behind us. And the reason we were successful is because we had a lot of champions on that team. Shafty won championships. Dick Jackson won championships. All these people have won championships, and that's what it takes, because it takes that mentality of what it takes to get there. And I believe that that's why that team was successful, is because all those people put in the extra effort for us to be successful. I mean, that same year we actually went to Vegas, and that was the year that I don't know if you recall, the points championship was the countdown. You went into it, and then after 4 races, they break it down to the final 2 races. And we actually went into Vegas, and they were running the shootout, which was the Technicoat shootout at that time. And we went in there, and we certainly didn't have the best car, but in the long run, we hit on something, and lo and behold, we won the race. We won the Technicoat shootout. And we won the bonus that NHRA put up at the time. So that was a $190,000 payout weekend. So
wow.
That was spectacular. And then we went into Pomona with the points lead. And, unfortunately, things didn't go well there, and we lost the points lead on the final run of the year.
Wow. Yeah, that's the highest highs to the, not the lowest lows, but definitely coming up short has got to be painful. And that ties together. That's something that you and Doug Kalitta have got in common, having experienced those moments at the hand of the same person, incidentally. Okay, so let's bring it beyond David Powers to how we got to where you are right now, because then I want to talk a little bit about Doug and lean on some of your knowledge over this vast experience on how these cars actually work. So to from then to here.
So from David Powers, that was like I said, 2005 to 2008. End of 2008, that's the year that all of us switched from 85% back to 90%, and so certainly that brought us challenges. We didn't have as successful of a year in 2008, and obviously the housing market was in dire straits at that point. David Powers was in the housing thing. Caterpillar, same thing. The markets were going down. They weren't sure what their involvement would be for the following year, and I had a little inside information that they may not be coming back, and so Mike Guger and I kind of jumped off that and went to work for Kenny Bernstein when Tim and Kim left, and so that was 2009 with Budweiser. One of the things we were proud of was getting, the last win with Budweiser, which was Richmond in 2009. And then, putting together the program that Kenny had in 2010 with Coparts and that. And once again, things didn't go very well with that. And Guger and I were both looking for another job, partway through 10. I really had nothing going, and J.R. Todd said, hey, I'm going to have Jake Kallett give you a call. He wants me to build this Pro Mod car, and I want you to be involved with it. I'm like, oh, brother, okay. So in,
now you're in Pro Mod of like, whatever, like I'll do anything, but here we are. It's just, it's getting a little.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to do whatever. I mean, same thing, like you said, like I said, you just do what it takes to put, food on the table. And okay, I'll go do this Pro Mod thing. And so in 2010, we went over there and ran the series over there. And we showed up with Mike Guger and JR and myself and the guy that built the race car, Garrett Livingston. And we knew nothing about what we were doing. We built this car over here and drug it over there, and right off the bat we were pretty competitive. We won what did we win? 4 of the 8 races there with the two car team we had, and they had what was called a belt for the championship, and there was a points leader thing. So the championship went to the guy that won this belt, and we lost in the semifinals of that, but we actually did win the points championship, which when it was all said and done, paid the same amount of money. So, that was really interesting. And once again, it diversified my career there again. But the first love was fuel cars. And I was getting ready to leave Qatar, and Bob Vandergrift called me, and I'm in Qatar, and says, hey, I want you to come and run my car in Abu Dhabi. And so I'm like, when is this race? And it's like, oh, it's in a few weeks. I'm like, so I'm heading back home like the next day back to the United States. And I end up a week later going back over to Abu Dhabi to run the Yas Marina top fuel car with Rod Fuller driving it. And so that's what started my time with Bob Vandergrift in 2011. He had this program with Rod Fuller driving a part-time team, and he'd got this deal from Yas Marina. Mubadala was the company that owned all of that, the Prince over there. And I'm back in Top Fuel again. And so partway through the year, Bob was unhappy with the performance of his car, and he actually at Denver, he said, I want you on my car. And so I ended up working on his car and worked there all the way up until 2013. End of the year, we didn't have that great performance. Bob decided to go in a different direction. And Don Schumacher hired me to run Jack Beckman's car, and jumping back into funny car certainly wasn't probably the greatest thing, but once again, just trying to survive. And we did okay, but we struggled at times. And anyway, we weren't certainly at the level that Don Schumacher races at. And he decided to make a change. And so I helped, as many of the smaller funded teams the rest of the year. And then I called Jim O and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. Is there anything out there?" And he goes, "Oh, this is amazing you called me because we're thinking of making some changes here." And so he said, "I'm going to talk to Connie and see." And Connie remembered who I was and said, "Yeah, okay, we'll do that." And so that's how I started with Kalitta's in 2016.
Wow. And the rest is history. Last year, you and Troy Fashing combined with Doug to get second, come down to, very, very close championship in the final race, coming up a little bit short, come out and win the first race of this season. And given your background and the background of Doug and the stories and the close brushes with championships and all of those different things, and everybody's on a mission, Rob, but you're on a different kind of mission, I would imagine, you guys.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, we feel like we did really well at the end of last year. We just didn't have what it took in qualifying. I mean, we really lost a lot of points qualifying, and what that comes down to is just racing smarter and having a car that can pick up points. And you don't necessarily have to qualify number one, but just a couple more points here and there, and we're the world champions instead of Steve Torrance. And so, we've made that a goal this year to try and get points in qualifying. And truthfully, it was a goal before, but not a real focused goal. I mean, our goal was always to, get the best car by Sunday so that we could win the race. And now it's like, well, let's get as many little points as we can get that in our mindset so that when we get into countdown that we're already programmed to do that. And so this year we started off at Pomona, we picked up a few points. At Phoenix in Q1, we got points. Q2 and 3, we struggled, but, from those, struggles, we came up with, a solution. And on race day, we had a really good car. Final round was, Steve Torrance stepped up with a 67, and the car did something it hadn't done all day. It spun the tires. So, looking into Gainesville, we thought we're in a good position, and now we're going to have to, when we start racing again, refocus and get back on it and keep on rolling.
Okay, so we had originally planned on talking for 30 minutes. This has been, I'm captivated by it just because of the names and the people that you're bringing up and all the cross-pollination that has gone on. But I want to know a little bit about, you gained a lot of experience through that time, and now you got to put it all in play for Connie Kalitta with Doug Kalitta in 2020 and a modern era Nitro car. So, give me a thought or two. I know they're complicated and they're complex. We spoke with Sean earlier this week, for instance, and he told us about some of the different lessons he'd learned from Alan about the systems on the car and, pedaling a car, how you don't just lift off the throttle and what it does and how it works. These machines are so complex, even though you're just going straight, controlling 11,000 horsepower the way that you do and the repeatability of these cars, the fact that they go down the track once. Dickie Venables told me one time, he said, it's a miracle that these cars go down the track one time, let alone as often as they do. What would you say, what are the most critical areas of running a Nitro car? What makes a good crew chief?
Well, I mean, what makes a good crew chief is someone that can adjust to the problems. I mean, there's always problems. It's a problem solving. And at a great degree. And like you said, the cars are very complex. I mean, we get new partners, sponsor-wise, and they come to the track and they get the inside view and they, look under the cowl and they're like, oh my gosh, I'd never believed that there's this much complexity for a car that, goes, 3.6 seconds at 330 miles an hour. And, that whether that be the clutch system, the fuel system, the data loggers, There's a tremendous amount of complexity, and certainly all the safety systems now on the cars. There's a lot of complexity there with all the electronics. And so the biggest thing with any crew chief is problem solving. And like you said, with Dickie Venables, it is amazing. When these cars, hit the throttle and two of them go side by side, it's like a thing of beauty because there's so much that goes into that, so much thought and preparation by everybody to get it to that point.
Yeah, amazing stuff. The fuel systems, the clutch, and ultimately it comes down to a driver like Doug to get to the finish line first. However it may happen. Just so interesting. I can't wait to go back racing. Rob, let me ask you this one before we let you go. Okay, great career. You've lived your dream. You got involved. You got hooked on this sport, and you've been nonstop since since you got your first job in '79. You got your driver's license in '76. You've been living in drag racing. Is there a moment that stands out above the rest, like a moment or two moments that are your moments that you that are your defining moments as a drag racer?
Well, I think the number one would have been, having my daughter born the same week I won my very first race as a crew chief in 1996 in Dallas. And then a couple other ones would be 1997 winning the U.S. Nationals with Bazemore. We had a really good car there and just kind of, went through the field. We weren't the quickest, but we were certainly the most consistent. And then, last year we started the year off. We won Pomona, the Winter Nationals. Lull in the action. Come to Indy. Doug's never won Indy. Connie's 60th year racing. Get the car in position and win the U.S. Nationals. Get into the countdown, and we did really well. We just didn't come up number one at the end. We win the World Finals. So I think those are probably the real defining moments in my career.
And what I love about it is that the one of the big defining moments is a very recent moment, which tells us the best is yet to come, I think. Rob, thank you very much for coming on WFO Radio and sharing a little bit about your career. You're always very gracious out there on the starting line with explaining, right? That's my job when I'm on the starting line to pull you guys out of your trance, the debriefing trance that you are in, thinking about all the decisions you made. You and Troy are always very gracious, and you come over and you give us real information, right? Like you try to give us something to help us learn about what just happened without tipping the hand of what you just did. I appreciate that. And now being able to couple it with basically the arc of your career, you have invested a life in drag racing, and you deserve good things coming forth, hopefully this season. Thank you for sharing all that with me.
Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate being on here, and I hope you're able to get some of the other guys and tell their stories too, because there's really a lot of stories out there, as you well know, from just hearing about mine. All these guys, I think their stories deserve to be told too.
And the
reason, thanks for doing that.
Well, the reason we're doing this, everybody, is because Rob texted me out of nowhere. We've spoken, many times, but he was obviously bored and thinking WFO would be really good if I heard these people on it. You were advocating for other crew chiefs, and I insisted you go first. But so, who are some of the people that you think I should reach out to, Rob? Like people that you think would be interesting that would also submit to this? Being on WFO, because some guys like they don't understand podcasts, whatever. So give me a quick 2 or 3 that you think I should go after for some old school stories and discussion.
Well, first of all, I'll pick my teammates. John O and Todd Smith, both championship caliber crew chiefs. Troy has an interesting story of how he got to where he's at. Number one, probably Chris Cunningham. Jimmy Prock, I wouldn't be doing this. Jimmy Prock said, you're going to be sorry if you don't go do the Bazemore thing. You'll be thinking about the rest of your life if you don't take that chance and do it. So he would be certainly one. Dickie Venables, another one, another crew guy that's become a crew chief. Obviously, Richard Hogan, he's, a lot of years with Garlits. And, we've worked together a little bit in the past. But, our careers kind of go the same direction. We're similar age group. So there's there's a tremendous amount of guys. Dean Antonelli, I mean, he was the crew guy with John Forrest. Now he's a crew chief there. I think there's endless stories for you to pick out of all these people, all these teams. John Collins, the blower guy at Prud'homme's, works on the Larry Dixon Top Fuel car. Miller wins a couple of championships with Dick LaHaye. Then he ends up being the crew chief with Tommy Johnson. They've been successful. I think there's stories in every pit area for you to grasp from.
I love it. No, I love it, and I appreciate the suggestion, the motivation, but you had to go first, and I appreciate it. Rob, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on WFO Radio Podcast, giving us a little insight and entertainment during a downtime, but I am hoping we get going as soon as is possible, because as much as talking to you on the phone is fun, I'd much rather see you doing your thing out there on the track. Thank you so much.
Yeah, go ahead and reach out to those guys. If you need any help with that, I'll certainly go to bat for you on that. And I'm sure everyone will have a great story to tell. Thanks for doing this, Joe.
No, thank you, Rob. Rob Flynn with us here on WFO Radio NHRA podcast. And to me, and I wonder, Rob and I did not plan to just go through every job he'd ever had. But to me, I want to know that. I need to know that. I want to know these people's arcs, because honestly, I went from kid in the grandstands to fan in the 80s to now, I work at the series. And sometimes it's very useful to understand all the connections and all the people. Think about the super teams that he mentioned, like with Larry Minor, the people that were all there. Just amazing stuff. And to hear Rob lay it all out there like that he has continued to pursue his dream this way and all the connections, and now he is on the precipice with Doug Kalitta, Troy Fashing, those guys all working together. I think it is amazing, and I really appreciate him. And there were some that I don't think he did cover, because I got a text, in fact, right back that, Leah with the Dotes, when he was with the Dote family, he was had something to do with Leah in 2014 and 2015, worked with Bernie Federley early on, and just incredible connections. Was one of the crew chiefs for Gary Pritchett when he got his Top Fuel license, thanks to the Dotes. So just a lot of people involved in this sport of drag racing, and I think it is great. And we're going to do more crew chiefs. And now we got Rob Flynn out there booking the guests for us. That's the best part of it. Now he's vested in the deal, right? And I'm interested. John Collins, how about all the connections John Collins out there? Pretty amazing stuff. And that is the part of the sport that the drivers are the face, right? They're the PR representatives. But without the crew chiefs and the crew members and car chiefs, mechanics, this thing doesn't happen. It's real interesting to get behind the scenes. And thank you so much for listening, everybody. Thank you again to our big sponsors like Rodax Coffee and Grills.com, Marvin, and Magic Dry US. That's really Scott Palmer. Scott Palmer supporting WFO that way. Total Seal Piston Rings, TotalSeal.com for you engine builders out there. And hey, Nitro Crew Chiefs. They make a Top Fuel ring. They make a Nitro rings, and they give you great customer service. They're cutting edge. If you're not using Total Seal, maybe you should switch, since we got crew chiefs probably listening. Crew members, TotalSeal.com. They'll work with you. Call Keith, 800-874-2753. Samtech. Tell them you heard about it on WFO. Samtech.edu, the School of Automotive Machinists and Technology. Start your education at full speed. 713-683-3817. And Frank Hawley, Frank and Lana, Dragster Adventure, 866-480-7223, the Dragster Adventure. All right, more WFO coming up in the archive. If you're just itching for something new, delve into the archive. Find out what's there. I know you missed something. And if you want new content, just click subscribe. It's on the way. WFO, everybody.
This is WFO Radio.
I love WFO Radio. Oh, yeah.
The views and opinions of the hosts, guests, or callers do not necessarily reflect that of the station ownership, advertisers, or agencies.
You're working in the shop, you've got spills, you've spilled oil, it's everywhere. What are you going to do? I know what you're going to do, but that's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to go to magicdryus.com and order the official organic absorbent of the National Hot Rod Association, Magic Dry. It's lighter, it absorbs more, it's better for the environment. It's made out of coconut. It's made in America. magicdryus.com. They've got spill kits that include everything you need for a regular, normal household spill, all the way up to a large industrial spill. We always say, if you've got a cat, get Cat Spot. If you've got a shop, if you've got a factory, if you've got a spill, call Magic Dry. That's magicdryus.com. Hey, engine builders, Total Seal piston rings are the leader in ring seal technology, and they go out of their way to help their customers and will make custom sets for any specific piston you might have. Customer service, top notch. Made in America? Absolutely. They're located in Phoenix, Arizona, and they've got everything it takes to develop the world's best piston rings. Give them a call at 800-874-2753 or go to TotalSeal.com.
Start your education at full speed with the School of Automotive Machinists and Technology. Accelerate your career as a high-performance engine builder with classroom instruction and practical hands-on experience in the lab, on the dyno, and at the track. In addition to the block, head, and CNC programs, SAM now offers motorsport, EFI tuning, and an Associates of Applied Science degree. And SAM is a military-friendly school, approved to train veterans and other eligible persons under the GI Bill. Start your education at full speed. Go to samtech.edu today.
Hey everybody, how do you start your day? You started off with a little coffee. And do you want something cheap and vacuum-packed garbage? You want to pay for a retail coffee, it's like $11? Or do you want something that is good, like RoadAxeCoffeeandGrills.com? Join the RoadAxe Army. WFO users and listeners know all about it. Over 40 grades to choose from. This is roasted fresh per your order, not to mention hot sauce, spice rub. You got to call Marvin, get on the phone line, or go to the website, RoadAxeCoffeeandGrills.com. Check it out. That's RoadAxeCoffeeandGrills.com. Attention adrenaline junkies, Frank Hawley's Dragster Adventure is calling you. Rides available for the 2020 season. Go to frankhawley.com. They're coming to a track near you. It makes a great gift, whether it be licensing for super comp, super gas, all the way up to top alcohol. They can do it. But if you're a drag racing fan and you've always imagined what it might be like to drive a dragster, to accelerate 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and run 10s in the quarter mile, give them a call. 866-480-7223, frankhawley.com, the Dragster Adventure, and tell them you heard it on WFO.
Hey, WFO Universe. Want to hear your favorite interviews before anyone else? I'm talking VIP access. Want to get right to the interviews? Go to patreon.com/WFO radio. You get special VIP content, early access to interviews, and get straight to the interviews on patreon.com/WFO radio. That's patreon.com/WFO radio. Become a patron. Become a WFO VIP. Do it now.
This